Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about the most religious war in Christian history. But before we get into that, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And please make sure to turn on post notifications. That way you're always notified when I post. So without further ado, let's get into the most religious war in Christian history. So a long time ago, two religious groups called the Catholics and the Protestants argued on how they should pray to God, and this took place in the Holy Roman Empire in the middle of Europe. The Catholic leaders wanted the Protestants to follow their rules, but the Protestants was like, no way, and this started a really big fight between the two. And you gotta think, something like this hasn't really happened before. So it got big. The war was mostly about religion, but a lot of the kings that were involved in this war wanted power, land, stuff like that. Some of them didn't even care about the religions or how they prayed to God. And the war slowly started, and the people that couldn't agree on anything called their armies, and a big war started called the 30 Years' War, and it was long and it was terrible. In 1618, some Protestant leaders did not like Catholic officials, so the Protestant leaders threw two Catholic officials out of the window, and this was known as the Defenestration of Prague, because that's the place it took place, and this made the war even more big. When the Protestants did this, they thought this was their way of showing the Catholic leaders that they did not want to follow the rules. And instead of it actually doing that, the Catholic leaders just got really pressed and they got really mad, and they started a big fight over it. After the defenestration, the word started spreading, and kings and queens got word of this, and they wanted to join the fight. In 1620, a really big fight happened called the Battle of the White Mountain. And this was the battle between Catholics and Protestants. And the Protestants really wanted to beat the Catholics, but they couldn't. And the Catholics won that battle. And this was a sign that the Catholics were getting stronger. And the Catholic army was actually led by the Holy Roman Emperor. And his name was Ferdinand II. And this dude was really powerful at his time. And the Protestants couldn't put up with it. So they had to leave, and they weren't able to fight against the Catholics. And the Catholics were taking control of many cities and places, and the Protestants wanted to rely on other countries to help them fight. And you gotta think, the war is just now starting, but the Catholics started winning early on. And then, in 1625, there was a king of Denmark named King Christian IV, and he wanted to help the Protestants win against the Catholics. This is going to play a bigger role later in the story, just hold on. And the Catholic army was led by a strong general named Wallenstein against King Christian in the Battle of Lutter. Now, the Christians, at this time, they were very disagreement on how they should pray to God and stuff like that. So these people were just going at it, and they hated each other. But the Catholics would win against the Protestants in this battle, and they had to retreat because of this. In 1630, the king of Sweden, let me see if I can pronounce his name, Gustavus Adolphus, joined the war in hopes to help the Protestants against the Catholics. And now, you gotta think, the Protestants needed help from other countries because themselves on their own, they weren't strong enough to take on the Catholics, which was ran by the Holy Empire of Rome. And Gustavus led his army into Breitenfeld, and then another big battle between the Catholics and the Protestants happened, but this time the Protestants won, and this was a big turning point for them because they had actually won for the first time. And then in 1632, Adolphus had passed away in a battle, and this was a big loss for the Protestants because they had relied on him to help them fight against the Catholics, so they're just down bad now, so they have no big empire like him to help them out. And even without him, the Protestants tried to keep going to war with the Catholics, but because they did not have a big, dude or a big king to help them, they struggled severely. And many countries got involved after Adolphus, and it just got really bad, and these wars were between the Catholics and the Protestants. And then in 1634, in the Battle of Nordlingen, probably butchered that pronunciation, with Catholic forces, with the help of Spain, fought against the Protestants, and this time the Catholics won, driving the Protestants back. And because of this, the Swedish army, which was fighting with them, had to pull back, and the Catholics were gaining even more land, and the Protestants were slowly but surely, they were losing. After the Battle of Nordlingen, the Protestants needed a bunch of help from other world countries to help them, like France and stuff like that. The one I was talking about earlier was the King of Sweden. Also, they had help from Sweden, so they were needed other. To go into like detail. That's how powerful the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire was. They needed help from other countries to even put up with these dudes. And then in 1635, France joined the Protestants because they believed that the Catholics were gaining too much land and they wanted to stop them from gaining too much land before they, slowly took over everything. So France in 1635 helped the Protestants to win against the Catholics. Even though France was Catholic, they were afraid of the Holy Roman Empire and Catholics getting too big. And the guy who was worried about this, his name was King Louis XIII. I know there have been multiple King Louis in history, but King Louis was afraid that Catholics were going to get too powerful, so he sent soldiers to help the Protestants. Now, France was involved. Now, France was fighting against the Catholic in the Holy Roman Empire, and they were fighting against Spain. Not only did this make the war even more complicated, it made the war even more bigger. And you gotta think, these are not two countries, like, fighting each other anymore. These are two countries fighting each other, not only for power, but for land and cities and stuff like that. And then the French army actually had a really big army against the Spanish army at Rocroi, and they actually beat them, and this was a very important win for the France and for the Protestants and stuff. And after this battle, Spain became not so powerful anymore. And you gotta think, the Spanish, this was like one of the most powerful like forces in the world. And because of this battle, they weren't so important anymore. And the Spanish were slowly getting weakened by the France. Or the French, whatever. And because of this win, France became one of the most powerful countries in all of Europe. And because of this, they were able to help the Protestants out way more than they already were. And then in 1648, the war had reached its final stages. But before it ended, there was another important battle at Prague, which is a city. The city, which had been a key spot for the Protestants, was under the siege by Catholic officials or Catholic forces. After a bunch of forces, they broke through and they took Prague, and this was actually very bad for the Protestants. And you gotta think, the Protestants are getting really tired, and they needed to rest, and they needed peace. And then the war was near its end, and the soldiers, each side was really tired, and the leaders started talking about peace and negotiations. In 1648, both sides agreed to have a meeting in the, let's see if I can get this without butchering the pronunciation, Münster, and it was, that's where they met, in a city called Münster, and it was time to start talking about how to stop the war and some important decisions. And the countries involved actually had their own different things that they wanted. Like, for example, France wanted Spain to not get too powerful. The Protestants wanted to keep their land, and the Catholics wanted to remain strong. And this was the Treaty of Westphalia. After many months of talk, the leaders finally agreed on a peace treaty, and this treaty, called the Treaty of Westphalia, ended the 30 Years' War. And it gave different countries new borders and made some rules about religion. In 1648, the Treaty of Westphalia was signed, and the 30 Years' War were officially ended, and the fighting stopped, and people hoped for peace, but then, but the war had caused a lot of damage, and the armies went home, and the leaders tried to rebuild. And because of this, there was actually new borders. Old land was becoming their own countries, and old powers lost their old land. And, because of this war, a lot of borders happened and a lot of rules of religion happened. Even though the war was over, a lot of people had suffered and a lot of people have lost their homes. They were torn from their families. And yeah, that was the end of it all. But yeah, that was the video. I'm very sorry if the video was short. I'm just trying to think of some content ideas. And I'm just trying to actually, post this content consistently without getting burned out. And yeah. But please, if you like the video, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And please make sure to turn on post notifications. That's why you're notified whenever I post again. But yeah, I thank you, I love you, and God bless.